Good evening and welcome. My name is Jerry McDermott. I'm the Media and Communications Manager here at Fingal County Council, and I will be your host for tonight's webinar, which is part of the consultation process for the Draft Sustainable Sewage Strategy. The purpose of this webinar is to allow members of the planning team to explain the draft strategy to you and answer any questions you might have on it. If you have a question, please use the Q&A facility at the top of your screen, where you can type it in and then submit it for answering. Hopefully we'll be able to get through all your questions between now and 8 o'clock. I also want to let you know before we start that there will be a manned information stand next Wednesday, September the 21st, in the Pavilion Shopping Centre in Swords, where you can meet and talk to some of the team involved in the strategy. Queries can also be emailed to fingal.developmentplan@fingal.ie. The draft strategy is available for download at www.fingal.ie/sustainable swords, and submissions can be made up to Tuesday, October the 18th on Fingal County Council's consultation portal, which is consult.fingal.ie. Now, let's get things underway. Tonight, we will have one presentation, which will be from Roisin Burke, a Senior Planner with Fingal County Council, who is leading the Sustainable Swords team. Roisin is going to give you an overview of the draft Sustainable Sewage Strategy. Roisin's presentation will be followed by a question and answer session, where Roisin will be joined by our panel, which consists of 4 other people who are heavily involved in producing the draft strategy. Paul Carroll is a Senior Engineer and Linda Lally is a Senior Executive Engineer with Fingal County Council, while James Chilton is from Kpmg Future Analytics Planning Section. Kevin Burke joins us from DBFL Consulting Engineers, who are transport engineers, and Nicholas de Jong is our urban design consultant. They will be available to answer your questions, so if you have a question, please use the Q&A facility at the top of your screen, where you can type it in and then submit it for answering. Now, I'd like to welcome Roisin Burke to kick things off by giving you an overview of the draft Sustainable Sewage Strategy. Roisin, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jerry, and thanks everyone for coming along this evening. I'm going to give an overview of the strategy, where we got to date and where it's going. So just one second and I'll just share this, hopefully. Great. Okay, so I suppose first of all, thanks for everyone for coming along this evening. We do appreciate you giving your time up, and we really look forward to hearing your questions and comments. And as Jerry outlined, we've published the draft strategy, and it's really the culmination of around 18 months work. So I'll give you the overview of this tonight. This is our 3rd round of consultation, and as this slide shows, we began work in May 2021. That was our first round of consultation, and at that stage, you may remember, we went out to members of the public and members of the business community, and we had carried out a survey seeking people's opinion on swords, what was going on there at the moment, at that time, and what they'd like to see. We also went into the local schools and talked to the children, which in itself is a very interesting project. Following that, we published the Swords Health Check, and all this information is available on our website. And following that, again, last October time, we did a 2nd round of consultation where we looked at the emerging themes and asked people to comment on that. Since then, we've been working on our transportation strategy and public realm strategy, and now we're back out with the draft. So this has gone out on display last week, and it's out until the 18th of October, and following people's comments, we'll take them on board and produce a final document in November of this year. So the purpose of the strategy itself is to produce a placemaking strategy focused on the strategic regeneration and the compact sustainable development of swords. And our goals are to increase the resilience of the local economy, to provide for enhanced, accessible and inclusive, healthy urban environment. And the ambition is for this strategy to form a coordinating device that will establish a package of programmes that are prioritised, programmed and impactful. And lastly, we aim to outline these projects that can be funded as part of URDF or any other funding stream that's available to us. In order to achieve these goals and ambitions, we have 16 priority projects under 5 themes. So themes 1, 2 and 3 there you can see relate to the main street, the public realm and permeability. So they're very much interlinked. And theme 4 and 5 tie that strategy back to the sustainability element, which underpins the entire document. The first theme, and most important, is the Main Street transformation, and this is a significant project, and it'll see the Main Street really transformed and enhanced into a much more attractive and vibrant place where we hope people will stay longer and have a more enjoyable experience. And there's a number of projects within this, so we intend to change the Main Street and invoke this transformation by the creation of a new public space outside the old borough and the Garda station, the completion of the public realm at the Swords Cultural Quarter. We really want to enhance the pedestrian and cycle facilities, provide traffic calming, extend the footpaths out onto the road, have better pedestrian crossings, create areas to sit, to play, to enjoy the main street. We intend to relocate the on-street parking and rationalise the loading bays. There will be a continuous north and southbound route for buses only and northbound only for cars. And in the long term, we see the main street being a public space in which events such as markets, exhibitions, festivals, etc. can be held. So it's really to take back that main street and change the priority of uses so that the pedestrian and the cyclist has the priority of use over the private vehicle, which is where it's at the moment. Theme 2 very much complements this, and this is Reimagine in the public realm. So it's really about a change in the quality of the public realm in the town centre, and the focus of this is on a phased enhancement of that public realm that again provides space for all. So key local streets, we're talking about Church Road, Bridge Street, North Street, Seatown Road. We're going to have improvements on them in order to prioritise pedestrian, cyclist and public transport movements. And then the laneways off the main street are highlighted in the Livable Laneway project. So, you know, these all represent an opportunity to provide accessible and convenient places to live. At the moment, they're not being availed of to their full potential. Obviously, they're in the town centre, there's lots of facilities and services around them. So it's to make them more attractive. So again, that people will live there and create that connection and that life about the town at all times of the day. Theme 3 is all about getting to and through the town, improving the access, the permeability and the connectivity. The projects in this theme all seek to give pedestrian and cyclists the priority for safe and convenient movement through Swords. And these projects include the cycle network, the greenway network, quiet ways and home zones, Swords safe routes to school, and then lastly the Western Distributor Road. And then within these projects, there are further detail, which includes references to other projects and recommendations, such as the Bus Connects, Metrolink, connectivity to the DART, Green School Audit, car sharing schemes, and lots of things. So this theme is really about that access. And again, as comes across throughout the entire strategy, it's all about changing the priority away from the private vehicle and making the roads, the access, the permeability much safer and more convenient for the pedestrian and the cyclists. And what we would hope to do is where people have an option, or where there's an option that they can cycle or walk, that they take that option, that we're making the streets much safer and more convenient, so that becomes a more realistic option for people to take. Theme 4 is around the built heritage, and the projects here are looking to enhance and protect that heritage for future generations, as well as provide experiences for visitors that we hope in turn will create increased spend in the town. So we have obviously the Swords Cultural Quarter. This has recently been granted planning consent, and work will begin on the tender process for it next. And then 2 of the suggested projects here are the Swords Stories, where we would hope to capture the rich history of swords and provide an immersive experience, and that could include a heritage trail in and around the town. And then a second project also in the same theme is about St. Columba, and we've recommended that a feasibility study is conducted on the creation of a visitor experience around St. Columba's Church in Round Tower. So again, to celebrate the town's built and cultural heritage and add to that sense of place. So to add to the uniqueness of swords and highlight that for residents and visitors alike. And lastly, the final theme, theme 5. So this is supporting and celebrating the community of swords. And one of the best things about swords, and one of the things that came out of the first 2 rounds of consultation, is that thriving community that exists in the town. And the aim of this theme is to support this community and position swords as the county town and the best place to live, to work and to visit in North County Dublin. So this theme includes a focus on enhancing the natural environment, supporting community initiatives and celebrating swords through the promotion and branding, which could include a wayfinding strategy and making sure there's consistency in our approach. So again, when you come to swords, you realise where you are, we're celebrating the unique identity and we're creating a unique place to be. Another of the projects we've suggested here is the Swords Community Forest. So that's the provision of the green corridors around the town and linking into the centre of Swords, and that we provide these. And it's important to involve the local community in this project and develop ownership over this initiative to make sure that it develops properly and is maintained into the future. And one of the last elements of the strategy is the delivery roadmap and action plan. And for us, it's key to the delivery of the overall projects. And this outlines how the indicative actions that are proposed, and we're just showing who would we expect to support that in terms of other agencies such as the National Transport Authority, how we would include funding on that and possible timelines, and then obviously key performance indicators, what we would match our success about. So that is very much a quick run through of what's in the strategy. We're very much focused on getting people's comments and queries tonight. So I'll pass you back to Jerry for that.
Thank you, Roisin, and thanks very much for such a comprehensive overview of the draft Sustainable Swords strategy. And as Roisin says, if you have a question in regard to the project, you can use the Q&A button, which you'll find up in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Type in your question, submit it, and we'll try and deal with it between now and 8 o'clock. So let's see how many questions we can get through between now and 8 with Roisin, Paul, Linda, James, and Kevin. First of all, to our panelists, you're all very welcome. It's good to see you all. And James, I'll kick off with you first. How will Sustainable Swords and the Swords Cultural Quarter interact with each other?
Thanks very much, Jerry, and good evening, everybody. So the Swords Cultural Quarter and Sustainable Swords are two projects for the council which are happening in harmony with each other. So the 2 project teams have been engaging through the course of the project and over the last several months. So, for example, each project is complementary to each other. And for example, the urban design that will be part of the urban design sort of framework, the pavements and the trees and how the look of the Swords Main Street and of the area around Swords Cultural Quarter will be the same. It's be complementary, and both projects are designed to make Swords a better place to live in, to work in, to visit, and it's about trying to make it a place that people want to come to for the community. So both projects, different elements of the Sustainable Swords will happen at different times to Swords Cultural Quarter, but the objective is that each of the 2 projects will happen in harmony, and that's the objective of the council, to ensure that happens.
Thanks, James. Now, Roisin Burke, you've given us your presentation. It's a very, very ambitious plan, and the one thing that was running through my head while you were presenting it is what's Swords going to look like in 10 years' time?
very different, Jerry. I would hope. Like, we really want to see a big improvement in the public realm. So the materials, the palette, how the main street works, how the footpaths look. I think everybody would agree at the moment there's a bit of a patchwork quilt going on along the main street in terms of the footpaths, the trees, the different types of material, even the street furniture. So one of the most important things we want to develop out of this is creating an identity for Swords, that when you're on the main street and you're looking at the castle, which is such a unique and such a great asset to have, you know where you are. So part of that is getting a cohesiveness in the look of the building and our furniture and our signage and all that, and then to improve it. So very much to improve in terms of the footpaths. They'd be wide, they'd be even. We will have our segregated cycleways, our traffic. The traffic will still be there, our buses and our cars. And that replicated along and up and down the main street, and natural links to the other parts of the towns, to the parks, to the pavilions, down to the castle, and then a thriving Swords cultural quarter, which will have that exhibition space, the library, the public realm. And then lastly, sorry, and then I'll stop, is people there, people enjoying it, people hanging out and staying in Swords, hanging around, having a cup of tea, meeting their friends and enjoying that unique environment that we'll create.
It sounds great, and hopefully it will come to pass. Main Street is obviously the focus of it. Paul Carroll, you're involved in the transport side of the Sustainable Swords strategy. So one question that's come in here is, will cars and buses be allowed on Main Street?
Will I take that one, Paul?
Yeah. Thanks,
hi, Jerry. Thanks very much. Buses and cars will still be allowed on Main Street, whilst at the same time we're trying to sort of really improve on the public realm, and through the study that's been undertaken here, which is quite comprehensive, and previous studies, South Fingal Fringe study, it sort of has demonstrated that the Main Street at the moment is dominated by cars and traffic. I think it's taken up to about 75% of the area of the Main Street. So in order to try and facilitate huge improvement in the public realm and make it a place that people really want to go, what we're hoping to do is basically facilitate bus in both directions on the Main Street and cars in one direction only heading north. And we're quite aware that there's a number of car parks off Main Street, private car parks, so we want to encourage or facilitate access to them into the future.
Okay, thank you, Linda, for that. Another follow-up question for either yourself or Paul. We've heard talk of the Western Distributor Road, which our viewer feels is urgently required and wants to know when will it be provided as part of the scheme.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, I can take that one. So Western Distributor Road is it's a long-standing objective of Fingal County Council to provide it and to give much improved accessibility to that wider western quadrant of Swords that's seen a lot of development in recent years, places like Old Town, Moortown, out the Radial Road, and kind of the southwest corner of Swords as well. So what we'll be hoping to do, and it's come through in the development plan over recent years, it's come through in a kind of a strategic transport study that we published in 2019, the South Fingal Transport Strategy. And again, it comes through in this study that we need to make that happen. So we're in the process of appointing a team of consultants to bring that forward, and it's going to really facilitate, I suppose, what Linda was just talking about there in terms of providing an alternative route for people to avoid Main Street and to kind of free up the Main Street, the area of Main Street, to allow us to do all those nicer kind of people-centered things that Roisin was touching on in terms of the spaces for people and more space for public transport and accessibility. So yeah, it's an active project for us. We'd be hoping to get going on it. We see it as a key underpinning project to underpin the whole of this strategy, and it'll be we'll be getting going on that. So there'll be more coming from the project team, I would say, in the early part of 2023. We would hope to be going back out to the public with, it'll be going through route options, and these kind of projects take a number of years to get through, but we'll get going on it soon. So the sooner we get going on it, the sooner we'll get it delivered.
It's good news. Thank you, Paul. And just staying on traffic, I'll come back to you, Linda. Another question in here. What is going to happen to traffic on Castle Avenue? Our viewer says that it currently acts as a rat run and is congested during school drop-off and collection times.
Well, I think the strategy sort of provides for sort of an all-encompassing approach to how people move around Swords, you know, and as part of some of the work that's been done here, you know, there was a lot of consultation with the schools, and it was great to get the feedback from the kids and their experiences and their parents in trying to get to school and the barriers that exist for them. So I think that's one of our primary objectives, to try and remove as many barriers and to facilitate children attending school through active travel modes such as walking and cycling. And Castle Avenue and that area generally off Chapel Lane, what we'd love to see happen there is sort of to implement almost a quiet streets environment where very much the car is guest and cyclists and pedestrians you know, would have priority. And I suppose it would try to sort of ensure that kids and the parents are feeling safe and secure to cycle or walk to school. And so in that way, we would hope to encourage more active travel modes in getting to school and less car traffic. And I think that would have a beneficial impact all around.
You mentioned quiet ways and home zones and that's sort of terminology that would be, people wouldn't really be aware of it or know much about it and that sort of thing. What exactly are they?
Well, they're sort of they're roads as such, but that are more like shared spaces, and that, you know, they're self-reading in that it'd be very clear and very apparent that really the car is a guest on these surfaces and that cyclists and pedestrians would have priority on them. So there's a lot of interventions that can be done to encourage or facilitate that, or to make it very clear to everybody using that particular space where that priority lies.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Roisin, will the plan do anything about sort of vacancies on Main Street? There are vacant premises on Main Street, and that is the plan going to tackle that?
I suppose, Jerry, from our point of view, while we may not necessarily be offering supports for the vacancies, one of the key things we'll be doing is developing that identity for Swords and then offering supports through a shopfront improvement scheme to do that. But one of the things we really hope to do is really work with the members. I met with members of the Chamber of Commerce today to see how we can support them and they can support us, but work with the business community to see what is Swords going to be in 10 years. I'm talking about what I would like to see in terms of the space between the buildings, but also what are we going to do within the buildings themselves. In Swords, we're really lucky. We have such a really good, strong retail offering in the pavilions. You know, there's all those high street shops. We have Duns and Pennies and Zara, River Island, and I suppose I'm just mentioning the women's clothing shops, but there's other ones there too. And then it's how do we get our Main Street to complement this? Do you know, it's not going to be competing with it, but how do we get it to complement it? Whether that's through higher end, smaller, individual, independent stores, the cafes, the services. So it's how do we do that? And as I said, we have met with the Chamber and we're hopefully going to get some feedback from members of the business community and how we can help them and how we can then tackle the vacancy and in turn improve that, improve the offering we have in Swords for the people that live here. You know, Swords is a very big town already. There's over 40,000 people living here, and that population is only going to grow in the next 10 years and further and grow again when the Metro link comes. So it's to increase that offering for our existing citizens and then to encourage the visitors and that to come and to stay. So there's a few things, there's a few strands we'll be working on to try and improve the premises along the Main Street.
Okay, thank you, Roisin. Don't forget, if you've got a question, there's a Q&A facility up at the top of your screen. Just click on that, type in your question and submit it to us, and we'll hopefully get to it before 8 o'clock. And it's good to see that there's plenty of questions coming in. And James, one for you. One of our viewers wants to know, will the plans that have been presented tonight be the ones that are actually delivered?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thought has gone into those projects, and I suppose what we've tried to do is to take all of the research that's been undertaken for sustainable swords by the various people involved in the project, in tandem with all the insights that have come from the huge amount of engagement that's been undertaken for this. And that includes talking to a wide variety of people in the town, as well as several different surveys, and importantly, the school kids as well, to ask them what they want for the future. But the projects that have been identified that are included within Sustainable Swords strategy are the ones that we think are achievable, that we think they're pragmatic, and they're ones that we believe that will be implemented in or near the shape and form that they're in now. So I mean, there's some of them are long-term projects. So who knows what the funding climate will be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. But our objective would be that the projects that are in the plan are implemented in the form that they're included in the plan.
Okay, thanks, James. Kevin, if I could come to you, you're involved in the transportation side of it, as well as Linda and Paul. And we have a question here about people with mobility issues. Will accessibility be improved, and will car parking be provided for disabled people?
Yes, I think just to touch on the car parking, there's a parking hierarchy. Certainly people with disabilities will be top of that hierarchy, and it is that obviously be prioritised for any spaces there. I suppose it's important to know as well that there's many forms of people with mobility issues, and certainly I think at the moment it's self-evident some of the public realm and the footpaths, like around the town, aren't necessarily up to standard, and we certainly through the public realm strategy and improvements to crossings, etc. That will certainly we'd envisage a substantial increase in quality for accessibility.
Okay, thanks.
We have looked at accessible. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's great, Kevin. Thank you for that. Roisin Burke, if I could just turn back to you. Are there plans to set up a dedicated website to showcase the project and maybe support local businesses?
Thanks, Jerry. On the Fingal website already, so fingal.ie/sustainable swords, we have that dedicated web page which has all our documents. It has the background information, that evidence base that we use to select the projects that are in the draft strategy. And we would hope that this web page in Fingal will have access to all the projects going on in Swords, so that everyone can log on here and see exactly what's going on. So that's set up, but we are willing to add to it and expect to add to it as this project develops.
Yes, and indeed I'll add in one just wearing my communications hat, is that we do have a Fingal business directory page on the website. People who are part of the Fingal In It Together charter have the ability to put their business details and links to their websites up on the Fingal website as well. So that's there for anybody who wants to use it. Thanks for that, Roisin. Let's go back to the Western Distributor Road, and Paul, just another question in relation to that. What is the route of the Western Distributor Road, and will it go through Forest Little Golf Club?
So thanks, Jerry. As I said, we're getting started in terms of appointing a consultant on this project now, and we'll go through the various stages that any kind of road project goes through in terms of route optioneering and environmental assessment. So as part of that, there'll be a route option study done, and we'll see exactly where the best route option for that is. As part of that process then, and it's an integral part of that, there'll be there's usually at least 2 non-statutory consultation periods that we publish documents and studies and background materials to kind of explain what we're doing, and how we've come to these decisions in terms of trying to minimize impacts on on people's houses and on farms, on golf courses, on businesses, on the environment generally. So that's all to be done. That's a kind of a multi-year process, and I suppose that'll be over the next few years. Now there'll be a lot more kind of consultation by us to get to a stage where we have a preferred route, and then maybe bringing something forward through to the formal planning stage. But to get to that planning stage, there's a lot of background work, there's a lot of studies, you know, and assessments that go into that, and that'll all happen over the next few years. So people who are worried about, say, the golf course, we'll definitely be talking to people in the area at a general level, and also then specific kind of property owners or farm owners or you know, resident associations to kind of tease out the issues and to get that local knowledge.
So I think the message there is that there will be plenty of consultation on that project. Yeah,
Indeed.
Thank you. Linda explained what quiet ways and home zones were. James, perhaps you could explain to us what a livable laneway is.
Yeah, I can do. Thanks, Jerry. So I mean, I suppose starting point is what isn't a livable laneway, and many laneways and swords now they're dominated by cars. They have some little space for pedestrians, poor surface quality, poor lighting, little passive surveillance, so that they can be unsafe places. So reversing that, making them vibrant and attractive places through better lighting, better surfacing, reducing the amount of cars in them, making them places where people perhaps want to live, but having better street furniture there, better planting, just making them more attractive, more vibrant places, so that and the idea then would be to increase footfall and to encourage people to use those laneways to move through swords. So it's all part and parcel of making swords a more attractive place.
Okay, thanks very much for clearing that up, and that we're certainly learning lots of new terminology this evening through the Sustainable Swords strategic plan. Looking just down through my question list here, and do keep those questions coming. There's a question here for Linda, just in regard to Main Street. Are you proposing to pedestrianise Main Street?
No, Jerry, not at this stage, and not for the, I suppose, foreseeable future. But nevertheless, we are looking to reduce traffic on Main Street to make it a much more friendly place for pedestrians. And that's not to say that, you know, weekend or evenings or for one-off events that Main Street can be pedestrianised. I think with the plan we're putting forward, that is very much possible, but not, I suppose, not every day, week in, week out. Okay.
Still staying on sort of on your side of the fence, the transportation side, Paul, the R132, how can you cut capacity on the R132 and also on Main Street without driving the traffic through residential areas?
Yeah, so as part of a planning application that we submitted to An Bord Pleanála and we got approved by the boards last year, the R132, we have a scheme on the R132 to install footpaths and cycle lanes and to upgrade the junctions, the roundabout junctions along there. So there will be some reduction in the traffic carrying capacity of that. Obviously, by making Main Street one way, there'll be a reduction in capacity on that as well. I think to go back to what Roisin said when she was kind of setting the context, what we need to think about is what Sword's going to look like in 10 years and beyond. At the moment, there's a population of 45,000 odd. That could go to 100,000 in future years. So it's a question of what do we do? If we don't do anything and we just kind of keep prioritising the car and car trips, the whole place will come to a standstill. So this is about prioritising the people who are able and who can make the choice to kind of take more sustainable modes in terms of walking, cycling and public transport. We know Metrolink is going to be on the way, not for a good number of years, but it is coming. We know Bus Connects is going to be totally rejuvenating and reorganising the bus network around the wider Dublin region. So all of these things are happening to kind of underpin kind of people's opportunities to rely less on the car, you know. So we would hope to kind of move to a stage in future years where, you know, the standard house in Swords and beyond is not, you know, doesn't have two family cars, for example, sitting outside in the driveway, that people can go down to, you know, one car or no cars even in some cases. And I suppose the analysis that that's coming through on us on the studies that we've done on this is that Swords is not spatially a massive area, you know. There's a lot of people driving very short kind of distances that could be more efficiently used, and the impacts of all that car use is on, you know, traffic congestion, it's on air pollution, it's on the carbon emissions, and it's also on the quality of life in places where we have to devote large amounts of surface area to car parking, which is kind of not the most productive use of space. It means we have, you know, a lot of car parking on Main Street, for example, which we think is not the best use of it, and it can be used to better functions, you know. So I suppose it's kind of trying to look, you know, not just 1 or 2 or 5 years even down the line. It's trying to take that long-term approach and seeing how we're going to be traveling in 10 or 20 years. We know things are changing quite fast at the moment in terms of the carbon emissions and all that conversation, in terms of, you know, oil prices and gas prices and everything else that's happening in the world today. So this is, I think, how we kind of can adapt to that and make ourselves a bit more resilient in terms of our local transportation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Roisin, if I can come back to you, the Ward River Valley Park, what are the plans for that? And do those plans include improved or indeed increased amenities in the park?
Yes, so one of the things we've tried to do in this sustainable swords project is have an awareness of what else is going on in the town, so that we can amalgamate and link those projects as we see fit. And as we've discussed tonight already, the Swords Cultural Quarter, and then another project that the Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department is about to start is the Ward River Valley Park development project. So consultants have been appointed, and the first round of public consultation on how to improve the park and what should be going on in the park will take place later this year. But we are already linking in with our colleagues as to how we can feed into that project, so they have complete awareness of the Sustainable Swords project and our plans for Main Street, and equally we have an awareness for what they're planning. So as everyone in Swords knows, the Ward River Valley Park is such an asset to the town, and it's an underused asset. So one of the main things that they're looking to do, and we're hoping to facilitate them, is better access into and through the park. So as you know, you can nearly almost walk from the Lord Mayor's pub, or where the Lord Mayor's pub was, right the way out to Knocksedan through the park. And that's something we would like to improve, to make that a much more accessible, permeable route, and hopefully to create a new entrance into the park that comes out onto the street, Church Street, just below the Main Street, and make it much more accessible. I know at the moment when if you walk through the Lord Mayor's car park and go through the hole in the hedge, it's almost astounding that you're in such a lovely park. So it's to open up that entrance and make everyone aware of it, and then create the links. The park offers a great opportunity to create safe cycling and pedestrian routes through the town, and, you know, to the different areas of the town. So that's something that's going to be starting soon, and I'm sure our colleagues will look forward to people's comments on that, the specifics of that.
Okay, thank you, Roisin, and do keep the questions coming. Kevin, I have one for you. Back to accessibility. Footpaths on either side of Main Street are congested and difficult to navigate for wheelchairs and buggies at the moment. Will these be improved under the plan?
Thanks, Jerry. It's a very good question. The footpaths, it's indisputable that I think they're not wide enough. The surface is substandard at the moment, and I know from our earlier work we found, I think it's 75% of the available space on Main Street is taken by either movement of vehicles or storage of vehicles. And the widening and improvement of footpaths, but I would say not just Main Street, throughout the study area is a key priority for this study.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Linda, if I can just come back to you, what are the plans for Foster's Way?
Foster's Way at the moment is currently not included within the strategy immediate area itself, but nevertheless, I think I work in development management as well, Jerry, dealing with planning applications and private developments. And as development comes forward in the future for Foster Way, whatever's going to happen there, we will do our utmost for it to tie into what we're trying to achieve with the Sustainable Sword strategy. And I think what's be really important for us is that permeability and connectivity through the town centre.
Okay. Another question here. The plan is very ambitious but expensive. Is there funding in place at the moment for any of the projects mentioned, given other commitments? Roisin, maybe you could take that one.
I think James is going to take that one for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, Jerry.
Sorry.
I mean, so our brief at the start of the project was, and the objective of the project was to identify a number of significant projects for Swords, which were capable of being funded under the Urban Regeneration and Development Fund. So that fund, the URDF, is part of a suite of projects under Project Ireland 2040. And it runs to 2027. It's currently got a budget of around €2 billion. So a lot of the projects are targeted to funding under that. There's 87 projects currently being funded around the country under that initiative. But that's not the only one that would be targeted. There's also a number of other funding measures, such as the NTA Sustainable Transport Measures Grant, through the Safe Routes to School programme, and as well as the National Home Energy Upgrade scheme. So the action plan in the strategy, which is available online, has detail on which of those funding routes we think is appropriate for each of the projects. So that's, I don't know if, Paul, did you want to talk anything about the transport funding?
Yeah, thanks, James. I suppose just to add to that, in terms of the funding for the transportation schemes, I know we're aware of the Metrolink and the Bus Connects at the national level being promoted by the NTA. Obviously, everything we've done here is kind of we talk a lot to the NTA and our colleagues in Transport Infrastructure Ireland as well, who are responsible for the national road network, and all of what we're doing here is in line with the kind of wider national policy and the regional policy that the Dublin Transport Strategy sets out. So we would be in, as I say, in ongoing discussions with them. Some of the schemes, such as the R132 project, is being funded and will be funded by the NTA directly, and everything else is, you know, in line with that kind of the policy and the funding requirements that, you know, they will stipulate to fund schemes like that. So we'd be confident that a lot of that will be funded. It's the only way really that we can achieve the transport needs of Swords in terms of the 10 to 20 year outlook. If we're to accommodate the level of growth that's there, we can't do it with cars, we can't do it with new roads, so we have to do it with, you know, really targeted interventions such as prioritisation of those more sustainable modes, and the funding will follow on that, and we've allocated project teams here to achieve that.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and James as well. Let's go back to transportation and that, and maybe a question that could be answered by either Kevin or Linda. Are there plans to increase the frequency of bus services in the area?
I'll take that one, Jerry. Kevin, if that's all right. Yes, there are, and I suppose that's really, there's a great opportunity, fantastic opportunity here for Swords in terms of bus connects will be coming on stream, hopefully in short to medium term, and Metro a while after. And we have engaged with the NTA through this process and sort of talked to them about what we're trying to achieve here and support Swords, and they have been quite supportive in that. And even in terms of bus connects, my understanding is it's very much a live service that, you know, can adapt to service areas as they come on stream, or demand as it comes on stream. So really, I suppose from a transport point of view, one of our primary objectives here was sort of to enable Swords to take full advantage of these massive public infrastructure projects that are going to make Swords a much more, I suppose it's going to facilitate Swords to develop and grow in a much more sustainable way than it has heretofore. So yeah, I suppose in short, yeah, bus services will be more frequent, and in the future that will only increase, I would say.
Yeah, and Linda, what about cycle access? I know we've touched on it with the Swords cycle network and the Swords greenways and that, but like, can you give us an idea of the sort of improvements that we'll see in cycle access in and around Swords?
Well, I suppose in Swords, you have on the western side of Swords, you know, a large area of residential development. You have then bus connects coming up the main street, you know, the Metro coming along the R132, and then towards the east Swords, you have the more industrial or technological parks areas. So what we're trying to do is really, with the cycle infrastructure, create radial routes that will facilitate anybody who wants to cycle getting from one side of Swords to the other. As Paul said earlier, from, I suppose, the geographical point of view, Swords really isn't that big, you know, so that if we got the routes in place, the cycling routes in place that, you know, encourage that change, that people who are currently driving very short trips, and we found this through the analysis, both the South Fingal Fringe study and through the work that's been done here, this huge amount of trips being done every day in Swords that might be less than 4 or 2k that could easily be undertaken by the bike. So in delivering those radial cycling routes, we would like to sort of give people an option, really, that there's an alternative way of travelling around and reconnecting different parts of Swords.
And I suppose, you know, the key to it as well is safety.
Yes, yeah. So that's segregated cycle infrastructure, which is what we'd like to implement over the next number of years. Would definitely, would prove. I think people using it would feel very safe.
James, Swords has a number of important heritage sites, but they are under promoted according to this viewer. What is the plan going to do to address these?
Thanks very much, Jerry. And that became really clear to us during the research that we undertook for the study. And one of the baseline reports that we commissioned as part of the study by Howley Hayes Cooney Architects was a heritage study looking at all the heritage significance of Swords. And I'm sure, as the viewers know far more than me, Swords has a huge history, and it's some of the sort of most important buildings might be the Round Tower, which dates from the 9th century, and Swords Castle, which dates from the 13th century. And then there's other buildings throughout the town which have been identified as part of that heritage audit. So two of those key projects have been included in the suite of projects included in the strategy. So one was around St. Columba's, and around the idea that perhaps there could be a visitor attraction based around the church and the Round Tower. And this is something that had to be undertaken in conjunction with partners, including the church, and looking at could you communicate the story of that site, of the monastic site that was the origin of Swords, to people in Swords, both to the community and to visitors to Swords, and as a way to attract more people to Swords. Swords Castle is again an important site, but I'd say a lot of people living in the wider Dublin area wouldn't be aware of the history behind the castle. So is there a way to, perhaps as part of the new Swords Cultural Quarter, to bring that to life, and even to link, and this is something that arose in the conversations with Fulshire Islands, and who was saying that perhaps Swords Castle by itself wouldn't be of a huge interest to international visitors, but were you to join Swords Castle, perhaps a Malahide Castle, through a greenway and have bike hire in between, that sort of two castle story becomes of more interest. But it's not just about the built heritage, it's also about, which is important, but it's also about the cultural heritage of Swords and the people of Swords and the stories they have of living in the Swords. So that's something that really became something that we became aware of through talking to all different people, and how many different stories and how many different communities there are in Swords. So that's why we put an emphasis on that. And this looks at the way that also places like Epic communicate stories, and can stories be told in a different way. So we include that as a project, as project 12, the Swords Stories feasibility study, to communicate the stories of people of Swords in Swords Cultural Centre, there's Cultural Quarter. Then there's also there's natural heritage. So that's as Roshan was talking about, the Ward River. As the first time I went through that hole in the hedge and saw how close the green space is to the Swords Town Centre, you just wouldn't realise it from walking around the middle unless you knew it was there. So it's about creating that linkage to the natural environment through better walking access, better cycling access, so that I suppose so that's the natural heritage, but also looking at one of the projects also looks at sort of a green link around Swords, the Swords Community Forest, which came from the Swords Woodland Association. So that's Project 14. That looks at sort of a link of natural forest all around Swords. So you can imagine that when the kids are in school, can perhaps take their own kids to walk around that forest in the future. So this is about a long-term plan. It's about looking at Swords for the future and how we can make Swords a better place. So that's the ambition of this plan, is to link all of that together. So it's not just about one thing, it's about trying to bring everything together into one plan.
Okay, thank you, James. Roisin, just to turn to you, I know you mentioned that you met the Fingal Chamber today and spoke to the business people, but we do have a question in here about wanting to know how the plan will assist the business community in Swords. Is there anything you've got to add to what you've already said?
I suppose, Jerry, we recognise that successful towns are underpinned by a strong local economy and sustainable employment where people can live and work locally. And what we would hope the projects arising out of this strategy will provide a framework to create nice places, a nice place to be that will allow that entrepreneurship and those businesses to flourish. So it's what we can do as the local authority to feed in, to create a framework, to create an attractive place for a business to start, whether that's through the attractive main street or links to our business parks and industrial estates. So we're trying to create the links that allow the entrepreneurs and the business owners to flourish within Swords.
Thank you. Going back to transportation, and again, Kevin or Linda maybe could answer this one. Will there be improved connectivity from the Brackenstown Road to Main Street?
Linda, do you want me to take this one?
Oh yeah, work away, Kevin.
Yeah, I keep it very quick. So Brackenstown Road is identified in the NTA cycle network plan as an improvement area. In the strategy, I can also say there's proposals to link it via what we call St. Colin Kills Quiet Way, and also Bridge Street and the Ward River, or the Ward Park, sorry, I should say. Thanks.
Okay, Roisin, I have two sort of similar questions for you. One was asking, how the people of Swords can get involved in the plan and support it, and then another one just asked if somebody wants to get involved in the project or the Swords Cultural Quarter, can they, and who can they contact?
I suppose at this point the strategy is on display. It's a draft strategy, so we'd really appreciate comments and queries. Any queries can be sent to the email address that you had up earlier, Jerry. I'm sure you'll call it up again before we finish off this evening. And then obviously we have the drop-in session in the pavilions where we can answer any queries anybody has. And then as each project progresses, they'll be part of their own consent process, so there'll be other opportunities for people to comment and get involved. So this is very much step one in bringing people involved and getting people's opinions on the project. So our initial request is, what do you think of the strategy? What do you think of the projects we've suggested? Is this how you would see Swords is going to develop? Can we get buy-in? Can we get that public support for them? Or if we're going wrong, where are we going wrong, so that we can work together to get the right projects that'll fit and be the most impactful to make Swords a better place to be.
And I think it's important, Roisin, that with a consultation process that you want to hear what people like about
Absolutely.
it as well as what they don't like.
Yes, unfortunately with these consultation processes we often hear from the people that are most dissatisfied. So if people are happy or people are encouraged by any particular project, we'd love to hear that as well.
Yes, and consult.fingal.ie is where you go to make your submissions, and the submissions are open until October the 18th, and we will have something up on the screen later on before we finish. Back to Kevin. Kevin, safe and secure cycle parking is needed in Swords. Is this going to be addressed under the plan?
Yes, it's a cyclist myself. It's critical, the quality of it, the safety and security. What we've detailed guidance using in the trip, and also a public realm and hangars, potentially shop, empty stores. What I would suggest is if people have ideas for locations of cycle parking, to certainly let us know through the consultation process. Thanks.
Okay. Yep, that's what the consultation process is there for. Staying on cycling, Paul Carroll, will radial, I think it's probably, it says radical, but I think it's radial cycle routes be separate and distinct from road traffic? And will they follow the road network but be segregated from it?
Yeah, so as part of this strategy, and I suppose it was kind of in gestation for a while anyway, that there is a need for much improved cycling and walking links in Swords. There will be a huge investment in the wider cycle network for Swords and the surrounding area. So in terms of radial routes, there'll be routes on, I suppose, on Main Street, Brackenstown Road, Radial Road, Forest Road, the Malahide Road, and we'd be looking to get a direct connection down to the airport as well. And then I suppose complementary to that, we're looking at, as part of a Greenway program, we're looking at the Broadmeadow and the Ward River Valleys to have Greenway type routes. So I suppose we kind of tend to look at them slightly separately in terms of the Greenway routes are the kind of fully off-road kind of through countryside more or less, and through kind of more natural areas, and then the kind of more urban type routes would be usually along roads but not necessarily. And then we might have some, Linda mentioned the quiet ways, which would be, you'd be cycling maybe on a much reduced volume of traffic on a quiet, quiet urban road. So there'll be a range of things on the kind of busier kind of radial routes with a lot of traffic, such as say the Radial Road, for example. We would be definitely looking for segregated routes, and on those kind of busy routes where there's a lot of traffic volume and high traffic speeds, it has to be segregated, and that's what we'll be pushing forward with. I think there was also a connection about connecting over to Newbridge Domain and over to Malahide in that direction. So we'll be looking at a connection to Malahide, and then hopefully that'll link into the Broadmeadow Way across the estuary there and into Newbridge Domain, and tying into the wider county Greenway network. So it really opens up a host of possibilities there in terms of people who want to get out into the fresh air and to walk and cycle and make the most of the scenery and the amenities around the area.
Okay, that's great, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for that. James, if I could just turn to you. James, you've worked on a lot of projects during your career, and that. Where does this project fit in with there in terms of its potential?
I suppose Kpmg Future Analytics, we're a planning consultancy part of Kpmg, and we would have worked, I think, at this stage in every county in Ireland. My focus would primarily be on tourism projects and urban regeneration projects. So we'd have done in around 35 or 40 similar projects, but of a much smaller scale. And they would, there could be, we're working on projects around town centre first at the moment. We'd have worked on health checks and that sort of thing. We haven't worked with a local authority on a project where they've sought this scale of evidence primarily. So they're getting experts in their field to contribute an understanding of a place to be able to develop projects from. I think that's important. You need to have that evidence first, and that understanding, particularly that level of engagement that's taken place. And for example, we got the Green Schools, Untitled Green Schools team that work with all primary schools involved as part of it, and they spoke to engage with 650 primary school students and went into the classrooms and spoke to them. And it's getting that kind of engagement from this. So in terms of the ambition, I think it's huge from Fingal County Council. In terms of the practicalities of it, I think it's a pragmatic strategy. So I mean, in terms of where it fits, it's probably the most in-depth analysis of a town that's been undertaken in Ireland. So I think it's a fantastic project that's been driven by the council.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, James. And we're just coming near the end, and I just have one final question to Roisin Burke. Roisin, what happens next now, and what can people do? I think we've touched on it during our discussion today, but I suppose that is the obvious question to finish off on, is what happens next?
Thanks, Jerry. So I suppose First of all, as we've said, it's a draft strategy. It's on display. We're seeking everyone's comments and queries so they can be made through consult.fingal.ie up until the 18th of October. And after that, we will be compiling the submissions received and drafting a report and outlining changes to the draft as a result of the submissions received. And we'll be taking that alongside the draft to our local members for agreement. And after that, we'll be starting to fund the projects, to look to develop them and engage with people at that next stage.
Right, thank you, Roisin. Well, unfortunately, the clock has caught up on us and we've run out of time. If your question hasn't been answered, don't worry, it will be forwarded on to the Sustainable Swords team. Thank you to everybody who did submit questions or comments this evening, and thank you all for logging in. Don't forget that there will be a manned information stand next Wednesday, September the 21st, in the Pavilion Shopping Centre in Swords, where you can meet and talk to some of the team involved in the strategy. And if you have any queries about the strategy, you can also email them to fingal.developmentplan@fingal.ie. The draft strategy is available for download at www.fingal.ie/sustainable swords, and submissions can be made up to Tuesday, October the 18th on Fingal County Council's consultation portal, which is consult.fingal.ie. I think it's worth stressing, as we have already, that all opinions need to be heard, so it's just as important for somebody to tell us the things they like in the strategy as it is for people to point out the things that they don't like. There is also an Inside Fingal podcast in which Roisin Burke and Linda Lally talk in detail about the Sustainable Sword strategy, and that can be downloaded at fingal.ie/podcast or from wherever you get your podcasts from. If you want to watch tonight's webinar again, a recording will be available later this week at fingal.ie/sustainable swords. My thanks to Roisin Burke, Paul Carroll, Linda Lally, James Chilton, and Kevin Burke. Nicholas de Jong was supposed to join us, but unfortunately due to technical difficulties he wasn't. But thanks to everybody who did join us this evening. I hope like me, found that what they had to say was very informative. Thank you also to our production team behind the scenes who made sure that everything went smoothly. Until we meet again, goodbye and stay safe.